Geoff Notkin is a meteorite specialist and host of Science Channel's award-winning series Meteorite Men. We'll talk with Geoff about meteorites and hear his thoughts regarding panspermia and extraterrestrial life. Maureen and I will also discuss some strange activity in Washington State, the Mars landing of the Curiosity rover, and other space and UFO news right now on Spacing Out. Everyone, and welcome to Spacing Out. I'm Jason McClellan.
And I'm Maureen Ellsbury. Thanks for joining us. We're really excited for today's guest. It's Geoff Notkin from the show Meteorite Men.
Our interview with Geoff is pretty fun, and that's coming up in a bit. But first, let's get into the news.
A crop circle appeared in a Lincoln County, Washington wheat field on July 24th. The appearance of this pattern follows an active crop circle season in England. And while crop circles appear all around the world, they typically appear more frequently in England, making this latest U.S. crop circle even more of an out-of-the-ordinary occurrence.
The field in which this crop circle appeared is located approximately 5 miles north of the eastern Washington town of Wilbur and is owned by Greg and Cindy Geib. The Associated Press described that nearly an acre of wheat was flattened to create the pattern resembling a four-leaf clover.
KHQ-TV, the local NBC affiliate, was the first to report this crop circle. And according to the station, crop circles appear in that county's wheat fields about once every couple years.
Some crop circles are quite mysterious, which leads to speculation about possible extraterrestrial involvement, while other crop circles are simply man-made pranks. But according to the AP, the Washington crop circle shows no visible signs that anyone entered the field. Cindy explains, "We're trying to figure out how they got there without breaking any of the wheat. It's hard to walk through the crunchy wheat and not knock it down."
Farmers who own fields where crop circles appear are usually unhappy when they discover the patterns of flattened crops because they lose hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars worth of crops. But Cindy seems to be taking it quite well. As she told the AP, "You can't do anything other than laugh about it." She also stated, "Of course, we don't have alien insurance." Fortunately for the Gibbs, however, some of the flattened wheat will reportedly be salvageable when they harvest.
The creators of this crop circle are unknown, but Cindy thinks it would be, quote, pretty cool if aliens turned out to be the responsible party. You were just in Washington, Maureen. Did you see any crop circles while you were there?
No, I was in the more green area of Washington, but Eastern Washington does have a lot of crop circle activity, like they said, over the, every couple of years. But, I mean, it seems pretty frequent to me. And again, these are places where they have huge fields of crops, and so they're easy places to go. But this one was visible from the roadway, and it seems that they're having a good sense of humor about it. And
yeah, definitely. And this one is interesting, as I said. No signs of human activity in the field, so a mysterious one for sure.
Yeah, and I think the wheat is a little bit harder to do testing on than some of the other crops, it seems like, to figure out whether it was a board that flattened it or something else. So it'd be interesting, but I don't think anybody's gone out to really investigate it seriously yet.
That'd be good if they do.
More Washington UFOs. The News Tribune published a story on August 2nd about strange lights recently reported over the Columbia River in Washington state. Findlay, Washington resident Jerry Nelson saw the UFO fly over the Columbia River near Burbank on the night of Tuesday, July 31st. He described the silent object as long and massive with 3 lights spaced far apart. He is sure the craft he saw slowly gliding through the night sky was not an airplane.
And on August 3rd, the News Tribune published a follow-up story revealing that several more witnesses saw the strange aerial lights in the area. Other witnesses report seeing lights in the sky during the same time Nelson reported seeing the UFO on July 31st. One witness reports that she has, quote, never seen anything like them before. But Betty Jones, a Kennewick, Washington resident, says she saw similar lights in the sky the following day. She explains, quote, they would go in a circle and back and forth. It was odd, like it was bobbing on water.
According to Peter Davenport of the Washington-based National UFO Reporting Center, 8 witnesses contacted him to report the UFO. And although he says the description of these lights is consistent with a commercial aircraft, the News Tribune reports that Davenport said that his interest in this case is piqued.
Some witnesses report the object or objects were silent, while others describe hearing a popping sound. And some witnesses suggest the lights in the sky were simply military helicopters, but no official identification has been made.
UFO sighting reports to the National UFO Reporting Center have nearly tripled in the past month, and the latest group of sightings in Washington's Tri-Cities area came only a week after the crop circle appeared in eastern Washington. And again, more Washington UFOs. The Tri-Cities has been a hotbed of activity the last couple of years. And I mean, I don't know if it's a coincidence that it's right after this crop circle appeared, if everyone started, you know, looking to the skies or what.
Right.
But
lots of strange stuff in Washington. Yeah, it's interesting. But it's fortunate for Washington that the National UFO Reporting Center is located in Washington. I know Peter Davenport gets lots of calls from Washington people. So hopefully they'll be able to do some investigation and find out more about this. But lots of strange things in Washington.
Yep.
UK's National Archives released more UFO files from the Ministry of Defense less than a month ago. Now it's Australia's turn. The Sydney Morning Herald reports that the National Archives of Australia released UFO files to the public. These files, from the 1970s and 1980s, have been released under the National Archives' 30-year rule, an act approved by Parliament that opens files to the public after 30 years.
Many interesting UFO sightings are documented in the files. The Sydney Morning Herald highlights a few notable cases, including one in which a high-altitude UFO was detected on radar near an RAAF base traveling at speeds of 1,100 to 6,500 kilometers per hour.
The Newcastle Herald reports that a note attached to the file says the RAAF has not been responsible for collecting UFO sightings since 1994. Interestingly, a different memo states the RAAF collected sighting reports up to 1996, but the Department of Defense allegedly continued to take UFO sightings until November of 2000. With this latest release of UFO files from Australia, it would seem that the Department of Defense did a little bit of housekeeping during the past year. I don't know if you remember or not, but it was only a year ago when they announced that they lost their UFO files. Back in June 2011, the Sydney Morning Herald sought UFO files from the Department of Defense, but the department's Freedom of Information Assistant Director informed them that only one file could be located and, quote, the others had been destroyed.
It doesn't appear that the latest Australia UFO files have been added to the National Archives UFO page yet, but they can be located with a simple search on their site.
Lots of files here, and yeah, you can just go to their site and read the entire files. There's some interesting stuff in there, some sketches, some really good witness testimony. But it is interesting that just a year ago they claimed the files were lost, and now they're releasing more UFO files. So
big surprise. I mean, that would happen to me too, probably. But
oh yeah, and they do have a lot of files. But
I haven't got a chance to read these ones yet, so I will be doing that shortly.
Yeah. Thank you for finding your files, Australia.
In space news this week, NASA's Mars Science Laboratory rover successfully touched down on Mars at 10:32 Pacific time on August 5th.
Hooray!
Yay! Okay, this car-sized science lab named Curiosity will now begin a 2-year mission exploring the planet's surface, searching for signs of past and present life.
Curiosity landed beautifully at its scheduled destination in Gale Crater after slowing from an incredible entry velocity of 13,000 miles per hour to 2 miles per hour in just 7 minutes. Time magazine provided the following explanation for why Gale Crater was selected for the rover's landing site. Gale Crater is a hole next to a mountain, and as we've all known since the day we stepped into a puddle, both water and water-driven sediment tend to gather in holes. There will surely be no water around today, but the chemical evidence of it, and perhaps even the biology it may once have supported, should remain.
Shortly after landing, Curiosity beamed its first low-resolution black and white photos of Mars from the rover's HazCams back to Earth. Higher quality photos have since been received, and many more will follow when all the rover's instruments are activated. Raw images from Curiosity are available on NASA's website. Very excited. The pictures are already interesting anyways, because it's very cool to see the surface of Mars.
Great pictures already. There's a video that NASA's put out that's basically a stop-motion video that's a compilation of still images that were taken as Curiosity approached the surface of the planet. That's really cool to see. We're going to be seeing a lot more very cool images coming out. They're still going through the process of making sure all of the equipment on Curiosity is functioning properly, receiving the signals properly. So they get all these cameras up and going. We're going to get some incredible footage, and then it's going to go off on its mission and start drilling and looking for signs
Samples,
of life.
yeah.
It's going to be very exciting, and you're probably all going to be sick of hearing about Curiosity because we're going to be talking about it a lot. On August 3rd, NASA announced partnerships with 3 private space companies, quote, to design and develop the next generation of U.S. human spaceflight capabilities. This partnership includes funding by NASA, and NASA is giving $212.5 million to Sierra Nevada Corporation, $440 million to Space Exploration Technologies, also known as SpaceX, and $460 million to the Boeing Corporation.
As Mashable.com explains, this investment of more than $1 billion in manned commercial spaceflight is part of the newly signed Space Act agreement through the NASA's Commercial Crew Integrated Capability Initiative, which was put in place to spur on commercial spaceflight and ultimately send government and commercial customers into space.
Through these partnerships, NASA hopes to launch astronauts from U.S. soil using American technology in the next 5 years. This goes right along with this huge surge we're seeing in private space companies, and with the help of NASA, they're getting the funding they need to go forward. NASA needs the technology to get astronauts into space, and now we've got these 3 incredible companies poised to deliver just that.
It's a healthy partnership, big dollars that NASA's spending, but they have to advance in this.
Well worth it, and I think we're going to see good things.
Scientists routinely look at life on Earth to better understand what life could be like elsewhere in the universe. Studying Earth life in extreme environments helps scientists understand extreme limits or minimum requirements for some organisms on Earth. One such life form living in an extreme environment was recently revealed by scientists: methane-spewing microbes that hide out in cracks of hot undersea volcanoes.
Life Science explains that these microbes, called high-temperature methanogens, quote, rely on hydrogen and carbon dioxide in their superheated deep-sea vents for growth, excreting waste products like methane.
Studying organisms like these allow scientists to better target their search for microbial life on other planets and moons. The recent study of these high-temperature methanogens is detailed in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences.
More studies here looking at life on Earth, and it's a very good place for scientists to start looking. As we said before, we hardly understand life here on our own planet, and we're constantly discovering new things about life here on our own planet. But it's a good starting point for scientists to understand further life on our planet, to target searching for life on other planets.
Well, especially in the deep sea, because the deep sea, we keep discovering these crazy alien-like life forms down there, and volcano pockets sound like nice
and
little...
these extreme environments, that's what we're seeing on other planets and moons.
Right.
We look at places that have these other volcanic activity, and moons like Titan, places where methane-based life is expected to possibly live. Looking at life on Earth that's surviving in these harsh environments gives a better target for scientists to base their search off of. But again, it's a very small, very narrow focus. I think the possibilities and varieties of life in the universe are limitless. We have no idea what to expect, but going off what we do know and what we can study, it's a good starting point. Now let's talk with our guest today, Geoff Notkin. We are excited to be joined by Geoff Notkin today. Geoff, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. Well, Geoff, you host a show called Meteorite Men, and I would love for you to tell us and our viewers about Meteorite Men for those who haven't seen the show, just a little overview of what the show is and what you guys do on it.
With pleasure. I host this adventure science television series, Meteorite Men, along with my longtime meteorite hunting friend, Steve Arnold. And Steve and I have been working together as a team for more than 15 years, scouring the surface of our planet for rocks that have fallen out of the sky. And we were contacted some years ago by a production company and said, well, we've heard about you guys, very interesting. We'd like to do a film about your work. A television series, rather. So for the past 3 years, we have been traveling the planet with a very adventurous film crew in tow, and we have found meteorites on 4 continents, ranging in size from a little tiny pea-sized space rock to a 273-pound monster. And we have used every technological device we could come up with to aid us in the search. That being metal detectors, GPS, ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, an amphibious tank with no turret, which was great fun to drive, but didn't actually find any meteorites itself. So it's part science, and it's part adventure, and it's part humor. And Steve and I are very different guys, but we've been friends for a long time. And I think part of the appeal of the show is the rapport between us, because we're rock hounds, and we're slightly goofy. So there's a lot of humor. There are a lot of mishaps on the show. Vehicles break down, we get lost. Steve forgets to bring the vital map that we need when we're in the middle of the desert. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, I think your combination of science, adventure, and humor, you don't need any more appeal beyond that. That's awesome.
Well, I agree. Thank you. And it's very interesting to me how the show's developed. We've made 3 seasons, 23 episodes, and the pilot episode was quite epic. It was filmed in Kansas, and we had jibs for crane shots, and it was all very dramatic, and we made these big finds. And as the show developed, it became a little bit more of a travelogue and a little bit more, I think, of the investigation of our characters. And despite our many differences in outlook, Steve and I have the same birthday. So we've been called the odd couple of science. Where there's almost, I hesitate to make it sound too silly, but there's almost a Laurel and Hardy element at times, because we do tease each other and there's a friendly competition. Steve will go, well, of course I want Geoff to find meteorites. I just want to find more.
So as a meteorite expert, there's the hypothesis of Panspermia that basically states that life has and can be dispersed amongst the universe via asteroids and meteorites. And what are your theories on that?
It's a wonderful story. As a science fiction fan and a space program enthusiast and a meteorite specialist, I find this idea intriguing, and it's certainly possible. Although when you look at the processes that produce meteorites, that being most frequently asteroidal collisions in the asteroid belt. So we have large bodies wandering around in space. Occasionally they'll smash into each other. Fragments will be thrown in all directions. So there are a lot of cataclysmic events that produce meteorites. So we start with this collision, and then the fragments travel through space for thousands or perhaps even millions of years. In the case of our planet, when they encounter our atmosphere, they start to burn, and then finally they smack into the ground at least several hundred miles an hour. So that's a lot of mayhem for organic travelers to survive. And as biologists will tell you, some forms of bacteria are almost indestructible. So if we had very small primitive life forms inside meteorites, I certainly think it's possible. But from a practical sense, could bacteria survive in a rock for millions of years while it was traveling through the solar system? It's possible. It just strikes me as unlikely. I think it is perhaps more likely that if there is life elsewhere in the universe, and I personally believe 100% that there must be, I think it's logical to assume that given the immense age of our galaxy, life could develop independently on different bodies. So I'm not saying no, but as someone who studies the formation of meteorites and the fury of in-flight explosions and the impacts that result from them landing on other worlds, you'd have to have some pretty tough travelers to survive all of that.
Right.
Well, while we're on that topic, and since I'm talking to one of the rock stars of science here, I've got to ask what is your opinion of the Allen Hills meteorite that was found in Antarctica?
This is a fascinating meteorite, and there has been an ongoing program in Antarctica for many years, and it's called the Antarctic Search for Meteorites. In 1984, a meteorite was found, and when it was studied back in the States, certain specialists felt that they had found evidence of fossilized bacteria in that meteorite. Now, I've seen many photographs and I've read papers about it, and the jury's still out. Every couple of years, the ALH 84001, as it's called, controversy will surface again. And this is the wonderful thing about meteorite science. We're always learning new things. There are many discoveries being made every year. So is it possible that there's bacteria in that meteorite? Absolutely. Do I have a definite yes-no feeling? I don't. I think we need to continue researching it. But really, looking at those photographs, you can see why people would believe. It's quite convincing. And researchers on the other side of the coin say, no, it was probably just caused by the percolation of water through the parent body, the asteroid that the meteorite came from. But the fact that we're having this dialogue is important. And I think if enough meteorites are studied from enough different sources, we may eventually find proof.
Incredible. So your company, Aerolite Meteorites, you guys are known as pretty much one of the leading groups researching and finding meteorites, which you also can purchase as well. I'm curious, what are some of the most significant meteorites you've found, and what's their significance?
Well, we have found meteorites all over the world in many different countries. And I think one of the most significant discoveries we made, and that's my co-host on Meteorite Men, Steve, and myself, discovered palisite meteorites in Kansas. And a palisite is a rare and beautiful type of meteorite that's about 50% iron nickel alloy and about 50% silicate materials. And in the case of palisites, the silicate takes the form of olivine crystals. And in the gem world, olivine is peridot, which is the August birthstone, and it's a beautiful green stone that's not dissimilar to emeralds. So it's pretty amazing to find a big meteorite to begin with. It really gets my heart going, and this is what I live for. These particular pieces were quite rusty. I could never say that one of my children is ugly, but they weren't the prettiest meteorites on the outside. But when we sliced them in the lab and prepared them, they were stunning. They are studded with these deep green crystals. And after further investigation and analysis, we discovered that the crystals in this particular palisite were not shocked. And shocking takes place, we believe, in the asteroid belt, again, when there are major collisions between asteroids. So the parent material, excuse me, the parent material is subjected to immense force, sufficient to actually put fracture lines through the crystals. But in the case of this palisite, which is called admire, we discovered that some of the crystals are perfect. They don't have the shock features. And so we extracted some stones and had them faceted. So there are actually now in existence extraterrestrial gemstones that you could own. And this gemstone's been approved by the Gemological Institute of America, has its own name, which is pallado. And gem specialists discovered within these crystals tiny rods that reflect light. And are you familiar with the gemstone tiger's eye?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know how when you hold it in the light, it appears to have a kind of a flash, a glowing light that seems suspended within the rock? Mm-hmm. That's called chatoyance. And we found chatoyance in these extraterrestrial crystals, had never been seen in a meteorite before.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that was pretty special. And my co-host Steve is he's a very experienced businessman, and he's a smart cookie, and he's always thinking outside the box. Well, how can we maximize this, and let's make a meteorite collectible out of this thing? I just do it for love. I find space rocks to be the most amazing things on Earth. So of course we discover these gemstones and the meteorites, and then Steve goes, well, we need to now manufacture meteorite gemstone jewelry for everyone. And I say, but won't that involve actually melting down the meteorites to get the gemstones out? And he goes, yeah, but it'll be worth lots more money. And I go, no, we can't melt down the meteorites just to make gemstones. So here is the perfect example of the kind of disparate views we have on things. But we usually come to a very happy middle ground at some point. And
That's
in fact,
good thing.
Well, yes. And if you're going to spend a large portion of your life traveling to some of the scariest places on Earth with somebody, it better be a good somebody that you get on with, that you trust.
You want them to be able to watch your back.
Yeah, exactly. We've been in some pretty hair-raising situations. We've had trucks break down in the desert 100 miles from anywhere. We've gotten lost. It's been embarrassing. Not recently. Not now that we've got the fancy GPS units. But just it's inevitable that if you do enough traveling in remote places, things are going to go wrong. And we've encountered all kinds of potentially dangerous wildlife, all sorts of snakes, giant lizards, deadly centipedes, scorpions, and found some scary things too, like unexploded bombs, live ammunition, artillery shells, an enormous missile that was just lying on the ground in the desert in Utah. So if you're out there in the boonies looking for space rocks with a slightly crazy hunting partner, as I have, you need to keep your eyes open. You never know what's over the next little hill.
Oh, yeah.
It keeps it exciting.
It does. I'll tell you one thing. I am never bored. I never sit around and go, I'm so bored, I don't know what to do. There's so much to do in our field, and it never gets old. We don't get out into the middle of the Atacama Desert in Chile at 10,000 feet in the mountains in the winter and go, oh, gee, look, it's just another meteorite. Every one, even a small one, even a tiny one, is a marvelous gift. They're visitors from outer space. So my work is quite similar to yours. I mean, we're interested in the mysteries. How did these things get here? Where did they come from? How old are they?
Well, I'd like to go off on something just for a second. I respect your scientific opinions, but as somebody who is a sci-fi fan and somebody with a scientific mind, what's your personal thought on intelligent extraterrestrial life being out there in the universe?
My view is, without a shadow of a doubt, we are not the only life in the universe. How grandiose are we to think we're the only people here? I don't expect that there are other life forms that look like us, but it's just a question of statistics. We all know that we're just a tiny grain of sand in comparison to the rest of the galaxy. And anyone who understands statistics, even slightly, who looks at the number of planets, solar systems, galaxies, it seems to me virtually impossible that life would only form here. I think we're very narrow-minded to even consider that. And I've spoken to astronauts, to biologists, to chemists, and so many times I've had this conversation with people and they go, well, yes, so there are millions, billions of planets, whatever, but, you know, we need the conditions to be right. We need carbon, we need water. Do we? Aren't we being a little narrow-minded, thinking that if there's other life out there, it has to have evolved in the same way that we have? I think that's unreasonable. Just because life on our planet requires water and oxygen doesn't mean that life elsewhere has to. I mean, haven't they seen Star Trek? Come on.
Exactly.
No, I think it's a fascinating subject, and because I am so interested in the space program and in multiple scientific disciplines, and because my work revolves around recovering things that have fallen here from outer space, I perhaps think about these issues a bit more than the average person might, or the normal person might. I think it's given. And may I just say that when we were filming season 3 of Meteorite Men, the last episode, actually, the 3rd season, we went to NASA Dryden in California, which is where they built the space shuttles. And we visited Sophia, which is this astonishing telescope mounted in a plane. It's a 747 jumbo jet with a 17-ton telescope mounted in the fuselage. And I'm an amateur astronomer, and I've had this experience where I want to observe the moon or Saturn's rings or whatever, and I go, oh, it's cloudy, I can't do anything. Sophia doesn't care about that. This plane will take off and fly high into the atmosphere to wherever they want to be to observe. And I was speaking with scientists from NASA Ames and NASA Dryden about what they've been doing. And they have discovered not only other solar systems, but another solar system with an asteroid belt in it. So that means in that solar system, they have their own meteorites coming from their asteroid belt and landing on their planets. So that alone is, to me, proof that the processes at work in our solar system are at work in other solar systems. And to me, it's a given that life has evolved. They may not be advanced, they may not have internet or cell phones, they may be little reptile guys or little jellyfish guys or something, but come on, there must be out there not just one or two. I'm thinking thousands of planets that sustain life. And I will argue that point with anyone.
Yeah, and actually, you just got back from the Roswell Sci-Fi Film UFO Festival here a couple weeks ago. I'm sure that point came up quite a bit there.
Yeah, and I love doing public events and being a science fiction fan and a space program fan and extremely interested in UFO phenomena. When I was invited to attend the Roswell Film Festival as a guest, I was so excited. And then when I got there and I found out that one of the other guests was Bill Mumy, of Lost in Space, Babylon 5 fame, who's one of my all-time favorite actors. I was almost speechless. So, I mean, seriously, what could be better than this? I'm hanging out in Roswell, New Mexico, site of the famous 1947 event with Bill Mooney. So that alone was magnificent. And Roswell's a fascinating town. And I talked to a lot of people there who researched the event. And of course, the UFO Museum is very interesting, very well done, I think, because they have put together this timeline of everything that they could find related to the 1947 crash, or the incident, as they like to call it, which I found very amusing. So here is a case where there are just so many credible eyewitnesses to something that happened. And we're all familiar with the story about the Air Force going, no, it was just the weather balloon. Come on, nobody buys that, do they?
Rarely.
No, rarely. I find it fascinating that an event like that was so well documented and witnessed by so many people, and not just the crash and the collection of the fragments, but the fragments being taken to the Air Force base and that went on this bomber to this base. And it's been extremely well researched. Something for sure happened up there. And I think we would probably all agree, at the very least, it was some top secret experimental aircraft that crashed, probably stolen from the Germans at the end of World War II. But don't you think that after all of this time, if it was just that, someone from the Air Force would have said, oh, sorry, it was just a secret thing and we didn't want anyone to know we were developing a stealth bomber.
Seems like a silly secret to drag on for so long.
Yeah, really. Although on one hand, I suppose you could argue and you could say, well, the Air Force wouldn't want to admit that they were lying to people. But come on, we know our government lies to us. That's news.
Exactly. Well, so you also have just come out with a memoir called Rockstar. Help me out here.
It's Rockstar Adventures of a Meteorite Man.
Adventures of Meteorite Men.
Oh, look, I've got it right here. Look, here it is.
Oh, awesome.
There you go. Nice.
And people can find out more about that and you as well at notkin.net, and that's notkin.net.
And yes, indeed, that's my personal website. But I would recommend that anyone who's interested in our work either visit meteoritemen.com or aerolite.org, which is my company site. But the book can be ordered from either of those websites and also on Amazon. Perfect. And it's my memoir. It's my life traveling the world as a meteorite hunter. Well, there's some pretty wacky stories.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of fascinating stories, and I look forward to reading it as well.
Geoff, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. This has been great. It's always fun for us to be able to talk to fellow, not only sci-fi geeks, but space geeks as well. So it's been a lot of fun.
Solidarity.
Yeah, there you go.
And we will definitely have to do it again because this is entirely too much fun. We have a lot to talk with you about. Yeah. So we'll do it again. But thanks for being on the show today, Geoff. We appreciate it.
My great pleasure, and I'd love to chat with you anytime.
You got it.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Spacing Out. Be sure to visit openminds.tv for all the latest news. And be sure to join us next week when we'll talk with space writer and spaceflight historian Amy Shira Teitel. Amy was at JPL providing real-time coverage during Curiosity's landing on Mars, so it will be fun talking with her about the Curiosity mission.
Thanks for joining us this week, and remember, if you'd like to submit a photo or video or anything else to the show, you can always email us at contact@openminds.tv, and we'll consider your submission for inclusion on a future episode. I'm Maureen Ellsbury.
And I'm Jason McClellan. We will see you in the future.